talk in English, like I already mentioned. I'm from Belgium. I hope that's not a real problem. So what are we going to see today? I'm going to talk a little bit about what you can do with Xamarin Forms. So if you already have some knowledge of XAML, like WPF or UWP on the Microsoft stack, it's actually fairly easy to get working with Xamarin Forms to develop mobile phone applications, right? So targeting iOS or Android or even Microsoft. But if you start developing applications with Xamarin Forms, you will notice a lot of UI problems that you encounter. If you go to Stack Overflow or any other tech forum out there, there's a bunch of repetitive questions that come along because a lot of new people start with Xamarin Forms and they find out quite in the beginning that you have to dig down to the platform level to do specific stuff. But if you're a little bit more advanced, you will notice that you can circumvent some of these problems, and I will show you how you can do this and give you some tips and pointers, all right? But first, I hope everyone that's sitting here is interested in Xamarin. There's a big conference, a complete day in Köln, on October the 19th. That's the URL, expertday.forxamarin.com. It's a free day, so if you want, please subscribe. We got international speakers coming. I'm also helping out with the event. And it's in Germany, so that's nice. All right, carrying on. So what are we going to build? It's going to be a tech demo, so a lot of code. I only have 5 slides, all right? But this is the scenario that we're going to build. Why? Because that's the typical setup of a modern application, all right? So we have a master detail scenario. What does it mean? That it means that you have a slide-out menu, a normal page with data on it, and a menu to go to other stuff in your application, all right? We're going to use an MVVM framework. Why? Because in modern application, if you want to have a good working application that's testable, MVVM is a very nice pattern to use. And I prefer Prism, so just going to show you how that's set up. We're also going to work with a special base page, but more on that later. Now, what are we going to tackle? And that's what I said, that are the most common questions that you find on Stack Overflow or any other tech forum or Xamarin Forms. So how do I add my own custom hamburger icon? So if you have a master detail page, you have the 3 stripes on the left-hand side to open up the menu. That's what we call a hamburger icon. And I'm going to show you how you can customize it very easily without going to platform-dependent code. Secondly, I will show you how you can add a Fab button. I don't know if you know what it is. It's a floating action button, so it's a button on top of your regular design layer. We'll create custom pop-ups. That's also something that's very hard for a lot of people. And the last one is a little bit special. If you develop regular apps, at least for iOS, you'll get a single line as a title for each page. To change that, you have to do a lot of work. We'll show you an easier way of doing this to get multi-line titles. And in the end, I will give you some tips and tricks on how to fine-tune your application a little bit, like how to have a page header that's depending on the device that you're holding, and also customizing the hardware button if needed. All right? So let me begin. Yeah, this is the site. First up, everything that I'm going to show you is already available on my GitHub page. It's this one. The link is also in the slide deck, so no need to copy it. But why is this easy? Because each step that we're going to do is a commit in Git. So if you want to follow that again at home, you just go through the Git commits, and then you can see what has been changed, all right? But I'll do this during this presentation already. All right, so we're in Visual Studio for Mac. We've added a file new project, Xamarin Forms, and this is what we get, the base template, all right? So if I start this up on iOS, all right? That's the only hard part of the demos. It always takes a little bit of time to compile. So just have to wait always a little bit. All right. Okay, welcome to Xamarin Forms. That's it, the base setup. Okay, nothing too fancy. First thing, like I told you, an MVVM framework is very handy to work with and also very good to make testable applications. So we're going to add Prism as our main development stack, all right? Adding Prism is fairly easy. It's just a NuGet package that you have to add. And then you have to have a few lines of configuration. So, and that's why I like Git very much. You can just step through the commits, and I don't have to type anything, and it will magically revert all my code. Only thing I need to do is restart the project. So now I've already added MVVM through Prism. Like I said, it's just a NuGet package. Depending on which IOC container that you prefer, you also need to add one extra. Like in my case, I like Unity. Okay, so I have to add prism.unity also. The other ones are the regular ones that you need for Xamarin Forms. If you add Prism, you have to adjust your application class in the Forms project and target a base class called Prism application. And what it will give you is a possibility to hook up your IOC container and also your navigation. And that's what I like very much about Prism, is that you have a URL-typed navigation structure. So you just put in a query string and you're working. Even so, if you want to pass parameters from one page to another page, you just add them like in a regular HTML URL query with a question mark and then a name is and then a value, and Prism will pick that up and put it into a small parameter container class that you can use and you can read out on each page and each view model actually. Secondly, you have to register your view models that are linked with your pages. You don't have to do that if you don't want to, because Prism has auto deduction if it's based on naming convention. So if they're called the same, like main page, main view model, it will already detect that and auto link. But I like that you can see what's registered. So I just still do this, but it's not needed. There's an auto linking availability too. Then I like to have a view model base class also. Why? Also something that Prism provides. You have an interface called iNavigationAware. If you add that, you get extra methods that you can use on navigated to or navigated from. You can get hooks on the navigation, all right? And that's inside of your view model instead of inside of your page. Very nice. And like I said, in the end, you just need a view model for a page, in our case, the main view model, and I inject the navigation service through IOC constructor injection and reroute it to the base class, the view model base. All right, so what did we do? Actually nothing, we just added MVVM, so the look and feel of our end result normally should be the same. All right. Like I said, nothing too fancy. What do we see now on top? Already a small bar with some space. Why is this? Because I already told Prism to use a navigation page. So that's a pattern in Xamarin Forms. If you wrap a page inside of a navigation page, you are able to navigate. If you want to go to a second screen, the first shell that needs to be loaded is a navigation page in Xamarin Forms. And I didn't create anything or didn't do anything. In Prism, you should say navigation page / and Prism will add that automatically for you. But because I didn't set a title for the page or anything, the header is still empty, all right? So what do we do next? We're going to add the master detail structure to our application. All right. Reset, discard, there you go. Master detail, like I said, what is this? This is a template that will add a menu, a slide-out menu on the left-hand side, okay? It's a default Xamarin Forms page type, and we're going to add it in our application. What did I do? I first needed to create that master detail page, of course. That's what Xamarin Forms requires me to do. And I define a menu site. So what is going to be visible in the menu part? I don't put anything for the master part, all right? Because I will let Prism handle this for me. So how does Prism do this? Okay. Now we have to tell Prism in the navigation that we were going to use the master detail page, the one I just defined. And everything behind the master detail page section in the URL will automatically be loaded in the master, actually the detail, sorry. So besides the menu, in the detail part of the master detail section. So Prism handles this for me. I don't have to do anything for that, just have to have a page available, in our case the main page, and add it to the URL. I also defined a menu. It's just a content page, like a regular page, but it will be loaded in the menu part. Okay, so if you start this up, now we already see some additional artifacts. Like there's a dummy title on the left-hand side, and there's now a regular title for the main page, because I now said it. The dummy title was this. This is currently my action button to trigger the menu. But because I didn't tell Xamarin Forms that it's running on iOS, it will put the menu, that's just a label, behind the status bar, all right? That's something we have to fix. We'll come to that later, okay? But this is the master detail scenario, something that you see in a lot of applications. The only thing that a lot of people will get when they're developing Xamarin Forms applications is that they have a designer, and they will try to do some fancy stuff on top, like have an animated icon to open the slider, have an icon on the other side, have 2 icons or 3 icons. And when you want to do this, it's going to be difficult if you have to go to the native code, all right? So we're going to try to do this in a different way. Before we can actually work and have this feature, we need to add something extra, and we're going to create a base page. So a XAML page that's going to be used for every page that we are going to render. And in that base page, we're going to solve all those problems, all right? So let's see how we do this. Add the base page. There you go. I always open the app.xaml, but nothing more comes into it besides registering those pages that we want to show, right? With Prism, you just have to always register a page if it's used in a navigation flow. So, our base page. Like I said, it's a regular XAML page, but it has some specific tweaks, and it's very important that you understand these tweaks because it's going to be your help and your guide for all the design problems that you're going to encounter, all right? So most applications will have some icons on the top with a title in the middle, all right? Because of the fact that we want to be free on how many icons we want to put there or how they are ordered, we just want to create a region where we can put them. So I just create a grid very easily. It's just XAML with currently a space of 50 pixels on the left and 50 pixels on the right, right? That is the area that you can use to put in icons or anything else. Just keep in mind that you have a center part. Why? Because we still want to have a page title, of course, all right? But we now define our own title in the form of a label instead of using the title that's defined in Xamarin Forms applications. Other thing that we're going to do, the header part is just going to be on top of our page. So it's a first row, it's another grid, and the rest is just the content of your page. Important part, you have to name the content of your page because that's what you're going to use in the other pages. So we just give it a name, base content grid, doesn't matter, just give it a name and be sure that you can access it. So how do you enable this? In the code behind of your page, you'll have to add some bindable properties. If you have these bindable properties, you can use them in MVVM, and they're needed to load in your content. So the first thing that we need to do is have a property for adding content, and we target the base content grid, so the one that we designed, that's underneath our header part, all right? Of course, we also need to access the title label, all right? We add a bindable property so we can use that in the other pages through MVVM or through XAML binding. So that's the base. If you now look to the main page, we have to rework that main page. Why? It now has to use that base page as its base class, okay? So how do we do this? We say in our XAML that it's actually a base page. And because of the fact that we added a bindable property, we can now, again, set the title, but we now use the base page title. That's the name of the bindable property that I created. And the second thing that's very important is that any content that you normally would put in your page now has to be inside of your base content property. So let me show that you again. So the base page content is pointing to the grid that we defined, all right? So anything that we design now in our page will be added to that grid as a child. And the other thing, the title is the bindable property, and that will fill in the label that we defined in XAML, okay? So if we run this, if there are any specific questions, just interrupt. In the end, there's still some time normally, but if you don't understand something, no problem. I tweaked the color a little bit, but now you see, actually the design is still the same, all right? The only thing that's now different is that we're now no longer are using the regular header of the navigation page. We're now using our own designed grid row with 50 pixels on the left, 50 pixels on the right, and a middle part that will put in the label, okay? Now, one thing I didn't show you is how do I stop Xamarin Forms from using the regular page header? Okay, we do this in our base page. We just tell the navigation page, everything is wrapped in that navigation page, to not set a navigation bar. So the top part with the previous version was the dummy title, and the title is now no longer shown, and only our XAML is being shown, all right? So that fixes actually most of the questions that we will have during the presentations. So next up. I'll run it again to show you. If you now look at our title, you will see that the main page is actually behind the status bar. Why? Because we're running on iOS. If I run this on Android, it has a fixed part for the status bar, so we don't have to do anything on Android, but we do have to do something on iOS. Also for the menu part, it's still hidden behind the status bar, all right? So how do we fix this? Let me show you. This is actually the only part in our demo that we do have to have platform-dependent code, okay? But it's very easy. First thing we define is a class called iDeviceInfo. Doesn't matter what name that you give it. We just have to have a property available that will tell us, hey, on this device, you need that amount of height for your status bar. Second thing that we need to do is actually tweak our base page. Why? Like I said, we have our header part. In this case, it's 40 pixels, but you can change that if you want to. But we add an extra row that currently will have no height, and we will adapt that depending on what height that our status bar needs, depending on which device we are running, all right? So we're gonna tweak that status row definition dynamically depending on which platform we are running. And how do we do this? Each time a page is created, we're gonna query the iDeviceInfo interface, and we're gonna ask, okay, what status bar height do you need? And we will set that to the height of the current row that's on top. And how is this implemented? Well, if you have an interface on your Xamarin Forms project, you can have an actual implementation on each device level. So in iOS, we also need to have a device info class that inherits from iDeviceInfo and will tell Xamarin Forms that it needs to give this implementation when this interface is requested. It's done through the assembly dependency type of part. Okay, that's the only thing that you need to know. And it's very long, but there's a nice class called UI application that you can use on iOS, and you can just ask it what height is needed. And why is this important? Because since the introduction of the iPhone X, we have that nice bezel on top, of course. So for a regular iPhone, I think that it was 30 pixels for the status bar or something like that. For an iPhone X, it's larger because we have that stupid bezel. But the UI application will tell you that. So there's no need for you to set that. Just ask, and it will give you the correct height. All right, so if now we run our application, yay, everything's shifted a little bit. If you don't like the current setting, you can still detect some pixels if you want to, but for me, this is looking fine. It's the default for all iOS pages. And even for the menu, I added the same implementation, and now it will take care of the status bar height. Now, like I said, for Android, you don't actually have to do anything, but could be that Samsung tomorrow also releases a nice Android phone with a bezel or anything like that. So be prepared and also add already a device info class. For now, I just say, if you're on Android, it's 0. We don't need anything, but maybe in the future, we also need to add something for that, okay? All right. Like I said, the only platform-dependent code that we're going to see. Secondly, we now want to have a nice icon for our menu, because I can still open the menu. If you see, I can still use the swipe gesture. It's there. But normally, there should be an icon here on top. So I can press it and open the application. And like I said, if you have fancy designers, that's something that they will try to change from the default, have 2 stripes instead of 3 stripes or anything else. So how do we solve this? Well, I will show you. There's an open source project on the internet. It's called Material Design Icons. What's this? Why do I like this? One, it's open source, so if anything is missing, but I'm going to be honest, I didn't have any icon that was missing yet. The list is very long. But why do I like this? Because it's presented as a font, meaning, and why is it important to be a font? Meaning that if you use an icon like this, you just set a font size. If you want a bigger version, you set 12, 14, doesn't matter. You don't have to change an image. You don't have to supply 15 images depending on which resolution you are. No, you just change the font size. You want another color, text color, black, green, yellow. You don't have to create 5 different images for a different color, doesn't matter. So 2 pro things. One, it's open source. If you miss an icon, just go to the GitHub page and say, hey, can you create this icon? And maybe some guy from the community will pick that up and create it. And 2, it's a font, so you can do anything with it. Same thing as scalable factors. A font is very good at doing stuff depending on resolution. There's a download button somewhere. Here it is. If you press that, you get the font. Even so, if you still want to, each icon is created with a PGN, so if you want images, no problem either. I think also the vectors are there too. All right? So for our application, we need to add this font and use it. Now, this is also one thing that you need to do on each platform. You need to add this on the right level. I always forget what it is. For Android, it's in the assets. All right, you have to add that true, it's a true type font, so you have to add it in the assets for Android. And for iOS, just add it to the resource. You also need to introduce it into the plist. So you have to say, I'm going to use this true type font in my application. That are the only two things that you need to do. So put it in the right location, and on iOS, tell the application that you're going to use this true type font. Okay? Once that's available, you can actually use it. How do we do this? The resolution is not that, well, it's a little bit low. I'll explain a little bit. In your app.xaml, the main part of your application, you can define resource entries in a resource dictionary. One of them is going to be a reference to that true type font. We're going to call it material font family. That's the key that we're going to use. And what's nice, in XAML, in Xamarin Forms, you can tweak it depending on which platform you're also running. So on iOS, we're going to say use material design icons, and that will be the entry for knowing in the info plist which true type font it is. And for Android, it's a little bit larger. You still have to say the complete true type font name, okay? But once you have this, you can use this key on labels to actually use that font. Something else? No, I don't think so. Of course, we now have to adjust our base page again. So we now have to add an icon that will be our Hamburger one. So in our instance, we're going to put it on the left-hand side. So it's going to be the first part of our main grid. And this is the way how I prefer to do this. I'll just add a button, and I will say to the button, use that material button style that I defined in my .xaml. It's here. It's a XAML style. And only thing that I changed was saying for the font family, use the material font style I defined on top. So that's how the magic glue works. It will know that it needs to use that true type font. Okay? Other thing that's a little bit special is you have to put a text, and that's a little bit awkward. You have to put a unique string in there depending on which icon that you're going to use. But like I said, on the web page, material design icons, if you press on one icon, that string will be there, okay? So each icon has a unique text reference that you need to know. You have to look it up, I know, I'm sorry, but the website will help you guide you there. This text string will represent a hamburger icon, okay? Nothing fancy. Why do I like to use a button? Because if the user taps on it, you will have a tactile feedback. You will see it change like you press the regular button. Okay, let's run our application. How am I doing time? 15 minutes? Yes. I have to pick it up a little bit. Yay! We have our icon, all right? And like you see, it changes a little bit when I press it because it's a button, okay? What did I need to do extra in our main view model? Sorry, in our view model base. We defined a delegate, something that Prism provides you. It's when a user does an action on the UI, you get events. A delegate command will reroute that event to your view model, so you can do anything, you can start any code what needed. In our case, if the hamburger button is tapped, we're going to the hamburger command, and we'll trigger off an event saying to our application, hey, user pressed the hamburger button, do something, okay? The base page needs to know this. Why? Because as soon as that user tapped on the icon, we have to tell the master detail page to present itself. That's the property that's called. The Xamarin Forms created this. So we have to put that on true, and the reaction will be that the menu will slide out, okay? Like you've seen in the demo. All right. Good to remember, it's just XAML. So if you want 3 icons on the left, 1 icon on the right, animated icons, just animated buttons, doesn't matter, a GIF, you can put anything in there. So that's the main key thing to remember. Okay, what's next? Opening different pages. Of course, you want to actually have an animation in the end, going from one page to another page. But if you do so, your second page, if I don't adjust anything to the base page that we now had, will always show the hamburger icon, and that's not what you want. If you want to go from one page to a second page, you want to have a back arrow indicating you're on a second page, I want to go back. And on the second page, we don't want to enable the menu anymore. Maybe. Could be that you still want it, but generally, you don't want to have a menu available on the second page. So what do we do now? Let me see. We add a page to navigate to, all right? Nothing too fancy. But we define page modes. So we need to tell the application what pages are available. In our case, we have none, that's the default. We have a menu, meaning if we're on a page that needs to have a menu available, it needs to have that page mode. We have navigate, so that we have the back arrow, and we have modal, so we don't have anything, and maybe an X indicating you have to close this page. All right, so these are the page modes. And then we have to enable the usage of these page modes. How do we do this? In our view model base, so each time a page is being loaded, we will enable this through a property, so you can set it in XAML. Okay, very good. And each time a page is loaded, it will check which page mode you enabled, and it will go through this switch statement. And actually, the only thing that we're going to do is enabling or disabling specific icons in our top bar. So in our case, if we're on a menu page, we need a hamburger icon. Okay, we set the visibility true. The back button will be invisible. And so the other way around for a navigation page. The end result will be that if we navigate, our icon will change. The way I do this in this base page setup is that I put all icons pre-defined in my XAML and just tweak the visibility. Maybe it's better in a larger application to not do this and inject the icons if needed, just to keep down the amount of XAML objects that are available on the stack. But this is a small demo, so no need. So now we're on a menu type page. We have the hamburger. We navigate. Hey, look, our hamburger is gone. I can no longer open the menu, but I can press now a back button. So if we go to the base page design, we now have 2 buttons available. A hamburger button and a navigation button. Navigation button has a different icon reference. It's the back arrow. And like I said, I just toggle the difference in visibility, all right? There's also something else that is being triggered. There's the handle hamburger menu gesture. If we're not on a page menu, I don't want the slide enabled. So you have to tell that to change this. Let me see where the code is. Here's the code. So you have to tell the master detail page when this gesture is enabled or not. Okay? It's just a property, it's already available, but you have to set it. So if you don't want the slide out being available, just put it to false and you can't get to the menu. All right. Very good. What do we have? We had a non-modal page, so just a regular navigation. Now we want a modal page, a page where the user can't get out of through navigation. So we need to enable an extra page type. All right, let's see. What's special in this case? If we go to our view models, to the main view model, depending on which type of page you are going to load, we need to trigger a different event. Why is this? Because for modal pages, you have to tell Prism, that's why we're using Prism, you have to tell Prism that it needs to do a modal navigation. Why? Because it's going to be another animation, it's going to be another type of page. But all the rest is the same. So this is the only difference. If you want to do a non-modal navigation, you just have to navigate, but if you want a model, you have to tell Prism that it needs to be animated model. So the non-modal, the linear navigation with a back button, the modal, a slide in, and again, what did I do on the top? I added an extra button, now across, and just tweak it depending on the page mode. If it's modal, I'd show the X and disable the other twos. And also, like you can see now, because I'm just using regular XAML, I can have multi-line titles if I want to. Something that's actually difficult if you're doing a regular Xamarin Forms and need to go to iOS level or Android level. For us, it's very easy. Just put in a label, I'll show you, and say that it has wrapping enabled. The base page. So again, we added a third button this time, a close button with, again, an indication to the icon. And for our label, we just said use line break mode, meaning that if it doesn't fit on one line, it will wrap and show you more text if needed. So we also attacked that problem. All right, we're almost there. The Fab button. How do we do this? So again, this is the floating action button. It's an UI element that needs to be on top of everything, and that has an action, okay? Again, the solution is to add something in the base page. We're going to create the Fab button, and we just put it as the last element in our content grid. And what will happen, because we are using XAML, elements are stacked, meaning the last element will be on top. That's it. Everyone that knows XAML knows this. And the only thing, again, that you need to do is toggle the visibility. The only difference now is that you need to have an action to toggle this, all right? Like I said, I'm using Prism, so I'm working with pub/sub events that are events that you can just send globally. This is one for the Hamburger menu. And you could do this also for the Fab button if you need. If it needs to react on something special, you can add an event to show it. In my case, I just add a label indicating if I want to have this available or not on here with a button, and I just fire up a command. But if you want to have something fancy, just create an event and trigger the visibility that way. In our case, it's actually very simple. Just pressing that button. Let's see the result. All right. There you go. Just show or hide it, okay? Like I said, this is not a normal response to have this just with a button. Normally you will have a page that always have this available, or depending if a user presses something that it will show up, okay? But this is just for the demo purpose. And again, it's just hiding or showing the icon. This is the same thing. It's again an icon from the material design, all right? Nothing too fancy. Now the last part, so I hope I'm going to finish this in the 5 minutes remaining, are pop-ups. So how do we handle pop-ups? Oh, I forgot to close the solution. Sometimes if I don't close the solution and I change the files underneath it with Git. Xamarin Form, Visual Studio doesn't pick the changes up, so I like to close the solution to be sure. All right, pop-ups. We'll create a control, just a regular XAML control, meaning you can do any pop-up design you want. If you're using some framework or any NuGet package that you need, you will always be a little bit constrained on what are the capabilities. If you just design your own control, you can do any XAML design that you want, all right? So we have a base pop-up, and in our case, I created a selection pop-up that's being based on that base pop-up, all right? And you just have a title, some message, and an OK button. But you can OK, cancel, yes, true, no, 5 buttons if you want to, no problem. It's just XAML. Only thing that you need to do is actually inject this inside of your code. How do we use this? Let me see. Here's the pop-up command. We use a pop-up service, meaning we have a class somewhere in our application that we can always trigger, and we just tell it to display a pop-up. In our case, that's going to be the selection pop-up. And what are we going to do? And that's what I said about the injection of controls. We're going to search for the current page that's visible, and we'll just add to the base content grid a control. Again, like the same thing with the Fab button, because it's the last item in that grid, it will be on top of everything. That's it. So if I press play, there you go. My designing skills are not that good, but like you can see, you can do anything with it. I just put the title, some text, and an OK button. And if you press that OK button, it will dismiss this. If you want to, you can still use the built-in pop-ups. This is a regular built-in pop-up that I use. Just go through the code on GitHub if you want to know how this is. But if you want fancy designed pop-ups, like designers like to do this, just use a regular XAML control, all right? Okay, in the last minute, I first need to show you this. If we run this on Android, we have one problem with custom pop-ups, meaning on Android devices, we have a hardware back button. If you press that and you don't do anything, you will get out of your application or do a navigation instead of dismissing that pop-up. That's typical Android, always takes longer to build. So that's a shame. Deploying to device. Okay, so yeah, I didn't design the buttons yet on Android, but the principle is the same. But if you have a pop-up and you do back, uh-oh, that's not what you want. You want to dismiss the pop-up. Okay, so how do we fix this? And that's the last thing I need to show. Up. Forgot to close. Let me see if it picked it up correctly. If you go to the base page, in this case, we'll have an override available, already available, but you just need to do something. What? If the back button is pressed, dismiss a pop-up service. What this code will do is remove the pop-up. And remove the pop-up will just check, hey, is there a pop-up available? Yes. Hide it and return true, meaning you did the hardware press. If there's no pop-up, no matter, we do false, it will still do the navigation or exit the application. And with that, we can still start it. I think we're at the end.
Keine Banane mehr.
Yeah, so, sorry, I overtook the minutes a little bit. if you want to reach me, just talk to me afterwards, or that's my Twitter handle. Questions, sorry, we can't handle those questions anymore during the presentation. And if we still have some minutes, no? Oh, yeah. I'm sorry, Rivera, just overtaking the presentation. So now the pop-up is available, press hardware button, and now it's dismissed instead of the animation. Okay, thank you very much.